Good evening to our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter audiences watching from home. My name is Brittney Geathers, the Black and African American Outreach Director for the Florida Democratic Party, and the moderator for the panel this evening. An issue in the news lately is how people of color are disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. This evening, we have an excellent panel of elected officials and community leaders that will discuss what's happening in Black and Brown communities around Florida and how we can all get involved to create change. Throughout this panel discussion, we welcome everyone watching at home to reply with your comments in the comment box below. And we will select questions from the audience for our panelists to answer during this discussion. Now, we all know someone who's been affected by the coronavirus, and so I'd like to take a moment of silence for everyone who has lost their lives to the coronavirus. Thank you. Now, I'd like to bring on our panelists, and they will be able to introduce themselves.
Good evening, Brittney. Hi.
Good evening, Chairwoman. How are you?
I am well and hunkered down in Boynton Beach, Florida, my home. And I hope you're well too. And I hope everyone watching around the state is doing well and staying safe and healthy.
Absolutely.
And I'm Terry Rizzo, Chairwoman of the Florida Democratic Party. I want to thank you, Brittney, for your leadership in putting this important panel together. Thank all of the panelists who are going to be speaking tonight and participating, and thank everybody around the state who is joining us. This is a topic of very, very great importance to our communities, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say tonight as we discuss this very, very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm State Senator Randolph Bracy out of District 11. Hello to everyone from Orlando, Florida. I've been in the Florida Senate now for 4 years, and before that, I was in the Florida House for 4 years. I was the criminal justice chairman as a freshman in the Senate, and so we passed a lot of policy and dealt with a lot of reform ideas coming out of the Senate as chairman, and now I'm the vice chairman of the Criminal Justice Appropriations Committee, where we deal with the funding of Department of Corrections, and I'm still on that criminal justice subcommittee. So it's good to be here. Thank you for having this.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Facebook family, friends out there and in YouTube. I want to thank you, Brittney, for putting this together and echo the sentiments of Chair Rizzo there. And thank you very much. I am Representative Susan Valdes out of Tampa, Florida, in District 62, proudly representing the residents here. And I am a freshman legislator. So this is the end of my freshman year, getting ready to get into our sophomore year in the Florida House. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for inviting us. I'm Representative Diane Hart, and I'm out of House District 61. Many of you all may know that I've been serving as an advocate for people incarcerated. I've visited more than 55 facilities. I look forward to the questions and answers that we will talk about tonight, in hopes that we will be able to do something to change lives for the many 95,000 individuals that are incarcerated in Florida.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Brittney, how are you?
Hi, Talithia. How are you?
Fine. Thank you for having me. I'm Talithia Edwards. I'm here in Tallahassee, local community advocate and coalition builder. Here I live and advocate for impacted community, the Greater Bond neighborhood in Southside Tallahassee. And so, of course, this is a topic that is gravely affecting our community. So I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Micah Kubik. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Florida, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the rights and freedoms that belong to every person in this state under the Constitution. I want to thank the Florida Democratic Party and Brittney for having us be part of this conversation this evening. It's really a delight and especially an honor to be on with some folks who have really been the strongest champions for a better, more fair, more just criminal justice system, like Senator Bracy and Representative Hart. So really a pleasure to be here tonight. Look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. All right. So thank you to all of our panelists for joining us. So our first question is actually for our chairwoman, Chair Rizzo. Can we get her up on screen?
Here I am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So Chair Rizzo, thank you for opening the dialogue today. The first question is for you. Since the coronavirus pandemic first began, many issues have been brought to the forefront, ranging from the state of our criminal justice system to mass incarceration. That's been fueled by racial inequalities. The Florida Democratic Party convened this panel this evening that's very important, and to have this conversation on criminal justice and how it's impacting Black and Brown communities. Could you tell us why this discussion is important for the party to be having?
Absolutely, because it affects our communities. And here in Florida, we've seen 7 years of inaction from the Republicans in Tallahassee that have led us to a situation where our state government is failing the people who need help during this particular crisis. There already are problems with the criminal justice system. And in the criminal justice system in the pandemic has exacerbated it. Just because you're paying your debt to society doesn't mean you shouldn't be afforded proper medical attention during a pandemic. It's outrageous. When it comes to healthcare in prisons, Latins and African Americans are by far the greatest impacted. Republicans refuse to implement the proper measures to prevent the spread of coronavirus in Florida prisons, which leads to inmates of color suffering the most. Regardless of the crime that they committed, they are still citizens of this country and deserve proper care. It's fundamental that the people have access to healthcare and that their healthcare is not in constant attack by this administration. Unfortunately, the Trump administration and the Republicans' response to the pandemic continues to protect corporations and donors over the well-being of everyday Americans. And we need to change that reality. Our Democratic legislators on this call and others have been doing a fantastic job, not only by providing resources to their communities all across the state, but also holding the governor and the president, our president, accountable for their chaotic response to this crisis. And we've seen it over and over again, what's been happening. Well, we in the Florida Democratic Party care about the well-being of our communities. And what we're seeing happening now in two very important communities like the Hispanics and African Americans is outrageous, and more needs to be done. And that's why we're here today, to have this important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question is actually going to be for our 3 elected officials. And so for our followers online, we have folks that are watching from across the state who may be interested in this subject, but may not be particularly, up to date on what legislation you all have been working on. So can you all talk about some of the issues that you've seen and the legislation you've championed in the Capitol that addresses criminal justice reform?
Well, I'll start out by saying that I too am a freshman, but I've spent the last 2 sessions working on criminal justice. I filed the same bill both years, simply because it was not heard at all in the House. One of the bills is House Bill 189. That's a game time bill, which would have reduced for first-time nonviolent offenders from 85% to 65%, nonviolent offenders. Having visited more than 55 facilities gave me a whole different outlook on exactly what type of legislation I should have been working on. And my thing was, you cannot advocate for folks if you don't really know what's really happening. So by entrenching myself into the system, it gave me a better insight on really what it was that people needed. And I too have to say that medical care inside of our facilities is terrible. Centurium has been one of the worst medical companies I think we've ever hired, ever, for the state of Florida. So imagine if you were not getting good health care prior to this pandemic, just imagine now what's happening inside of our facilities. So I want to thank Senator Bracy because he embraced the bill that I filed And then he too worked on that bill, along with some other bills that we also worked on for criminal justice. So I thank you, Senator Bracy, and I thank you, Representative Valdes, for visiting with me around the state.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So this is Senator Bracy. I couldn't hear Representative Hart, but I know her passion, and I know she's been fighting hard on a number of issues. Since I've been in the legislature and definitely as chairman, we've worked on a lot of different reform ideas, from bail reform to mandatory minimum, giving judges discretion, death penalty, felony theft threshold. I mean, the list goes on and on of the issues that we've worked to pass, and we've been successful to pass it out of the Senate. This year in particular, a bill, I'll just mention a couple bills. One, I had the game time bill. I'm sure you mentioned that, Representative Hart, that we worked on, where it tried to change the time from 85% to 65%, the lowest threshold. We would have saved over $1 billion. I had a bill to not allow for juvenile confinement. One bill that was near and dear to my heart that got all the way to the end of the legislative session was a bill dealing with Kaya Roll. Many may remember her name. She was a 6-year-old who was arrested. And so I had a bill that would not allow 12-year-old and younger to be arrested. What I did was negotiated that bill down to 6 years old, and we had an agreement, but sometimes in the legislature, these deals fall through. And so on the very last day, that bill wasn't passed, but we got it very far. The grandmother and the mother were very involved in that process. And so I believe that we have consensus going forward into next year that we shouldn't be arresting children. And then the felony murder rule, which is an interesting rule. So basically how it works is if someone is committing a felony with another person, they can be charged with a death if a death ensues. So to give you an example, one person who went along with another person, they were going to commit an act of a felony. That person decided to leave. Meanwhile, the police killed the other person. And so the person that left before the crime even happened, he was charged with the murder that the police did to the other accomplice. So many people have been affected by the felony murder rule more than any other law. So it's very interesting. And so our felony murder rule needs to be changed. And these are just a couple bills that I've worked on this past session.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Bracy and Representative Hart, for your passion and your work on this particular topic. I come to you with an experience of being a school board member for 14 years here in Hillsborough County Public Schools. And while on the school board, I worked very, very hard on the school to prison pipeline. And let me tell you, one of my biggest issues when I go visit the prisons is not only the ugly stuff that's happening in there, but when I look and see our kids that are just maybe 18, 19 years old that we know that came through our public school systems, and this is where it begins to perpetuate and begin, right? So Bobby DuBose had a bill that was House Bill, what was it here, 1231. And that House bill was one with students with disabilities to stop the restraining of students, as well as prohibiting the seclusion of them when as a way of discipline. So that's a very important bill that I championed, along with others that were in the education arena. So we all know that there's a certificate of completion that is given by the Department of Education at our school districts for students who meet all the criteria, with the exception of either having half a credit that they're due, or they didn't meet their GPA of 2.0, but the biggest barrier for our kids to earn that certificate of completion is when they do not pass the FSA or the reading portion of the FSA. So those three issues there will give the student a certificate of completion, and that certificate of completion does not allow the students to even go on to the military, a technical school, or not. So they're stuck. They're stuck in that window. So one of the bills that I championed this year was to try and see, specifically with the push of the industry certifications and promoting our workforce, that if a student had a 2.5 GPA, and if they had an industry certification and were ready for the workforce, then that certification, and they met the 2.0 graduation requirement, as well as either 18 or 24 credits, that then they would earn a standard high school diploma, so that then they can put that industry certification that we as a community valued enough to pay for them to obtain. So imagine graduating from high school with an industry certification, and now you're going into a welding job making $25, $26 an hour. That would be phenomenal. Now that you have to pass those certifications, industry certification tests, but at least that FSA will not hold you back from being able to move forward. So I too am looking forward to the conversation today, because all of these are interconnected. And until we realize that we need to fix the juvenile justice system within our schools and our respective districts and counties, then we got to start early on in order to be able to alleviate our prisons. And thank you both again for your passion on this, and because it's mine as well. And I've visited maybe 15 prisons with you, Representative Hart, and at all times of the hour, which is really a great adventure, because we have to go when they least expect us, so we can actually see what's going on. Thank you.
Brittney, I see that we have a question. I think somebody wanted to know what was game time. Game time is literally a reduction of your sentence from being 85% of your sentence. You had 10 years, you do 8.5 years of your sentence. If it was 65%, you do 6.5. But the bill was really designed to help people who had non-violent offenses first off, because we knew that it would be too difficult and hard of a lift to try and get our counterparts to accept anything else. So that was one of the reasons why Senator Bracey and I was fighting so hard for that reduction in time. But believe that when people know they have a reason to be fighting, they try and stay out of trouble. They try and do the right thing. We give them an incentive for doing the right thing, just as you would on anything else. So that's why that was so important. And the fact that we would save over $850 million over a 5-year period, money that can be spent to educate and to train and really rehabilitate our loved ones who are incarcerated. So that's what the game time bill was about.
Can I just add to that also? It has been shown to improve the conditions, the morale in the prisons. When people have an incentive to participate in these programs, and they do. So it's been shown to get people in education programs. The behavior is a lot better when you have these game time initiatives. And so there's so many benefits to it. And so that's why we fought so hard for it.
Well, thank you all. So our next question is actually for Senator Bracey. And so the Florida Department of Corrections has released data that shows over 200 inmates and over 100 correctional staff have tested positive for the coronavirus. Additionally, at least 5 inmates have died. So can you touch on, why this has happened and what could have been done to prevent this, and what the state legislature can do to, make sure we're protecting this vulnerable population?
I can't hear.
Can you hear me?
I'm not sure if that question was for me. Well, if it was in regards to the Department of Corrections, I think that the Department of Corrections has really taken a reactive stance when it comes to the COVID deaths and all matters related to COVID. Myself, Representative Hart, Black Caucus, we have given a number of suggestions. I think we could have taken the advice and the example of some of our county jails where they just released people who were waiting for bail. There are a number of certain populations that we could have released to ease the burden. We've got, nonviolent offenders that, have less than a year left on their sentence. We could have released them, had an ankle monitoring process where we still would provide for safety and monitoring. But we've just taken, I would say the Department of Corrections and the governor has taken a very reactive approach. And my concern is that, the virus is spreading. Just this week, every prison now has masks, but this is, we've been dealing with this now for a month and a half. And so we've had people that have offered to donate masks, and we've just got to the point where every prison has masks. So I just think that, to be honest, it's been a lack of compassion from the governor, and the DOC response has just been too slow, from my opinion. I think that's why we've seen other deaths, and my concern is that there are more cases.
Thank you. So I just want to remind everyone at home that you can absolutely ask us questions in our live comments box down below, and we'll try to get through those later on throughout our program. So our next question is for Representative Hart. So we see corona cases are spiking across the criminal justice system, and with Florida's prison system being the third largest in the nation, can you talk about what impact that's having on individuals that are incarcerated, prison workers, and their families that are affected by the system, since visitation is currently being suspended, has been suspended, and it was recently extended? So
this has been a very trying time for both the inmates and their families, and even for the correctional officers who are working in these facilities. We got started a little late. We should have started earlier. Families do understand no visitation, and many of them are happy not to visit for fear that somebody may come in and bring the virus. But what happened was the officers did not get tested in a timely manner. They were the only ones going in and out of the facilities. And because they did not get tested in a timely manner, they began to bring that virus into the system. But I can say to you that every day I get calls every single day. We get emails every single day. The inmates are petrified. Many of them are so afraid of what's happening around them. They see the inmates that are feeling sick, or even the ones that have gotten sick, and they put them into quarantine. If you all have been following this, there's about 3,900 people in medical quarantine, inmates right now today, or what there was last night. I don't know the numbers today because I've not checked them. But part of that is because they know people are coming in contact. It's close quarters. There is no social distancing. You cannot, beds are 2 feet apart. So there's no 6-foot rule that you can have. So I have to tell you that families are petrified that they're going to lose their loved ones. We had a choice. We could have done some of the things that Senator Bracy and I have been working on. We've sent letters to the governor. We've sent letters to the Department of Corrections. We have what's known as a conditional medical release. But these are dire times. So you didn't need to be terminally ill, which is what conditional medical release typically is. You should have been able to release the people who had heart issues, who had diabetes, who had asthma, who had immune deficiencies that were nonviolent. And yes, just as he said, you could have.
did we lose Rep. Hart there?
Put an ankle monitor on them. That would have I'm still here. So that would have been a plus for us to have done that. So I don't know what the governor plans to do, but what I'm asking the governor and the secretary, let's test our prisoners. Our inmates, our loved ones, these are people. These are not animals. So now they're caged and they can't go anywhere. Almost all of the facilities are on what's known as lockdown. That means there's no movement around the facility. Imagine the toll that's taken on people that are incarcerated, not to be able to move around at all.
Thank you.
If I may, I just want to also say, she mentioned mass testing. Throughout this time, we've only tested a little over 400 people. And you think we almost have 100,000 people
Right.
in Florida Department of Corrections. So my concern is that there are many more people that have the virus. And what I do believe is that there's a fear because from the Department of Corrections, from the governor, that if we do mass testing, we'll see that there's a lot more people, and then he will have to do something. And so I think there's just a lack of they're just slow to react and to act because I think they don't want to know how many people because that have the virus, because I think we're going to see a lot more and we're going to have to do something. And so I'm very frustrated with just not doing anything because I think we have to move people out of this system, at least for this time period, to keep them safe.
And also, I'd like to add to that the transfers from inmates from facility to facility, it kind of needs to be on hold right now because until you, to the point of being able to test every inmate to then make sure what we're dealing with. But imagine when the transfers are just going through from facility to facility, you don't know if you're actually spreading it even more. So I hope that those types of transfers had stopped.
Okay, well, I can tell you this, Rep, that according to the Department of Corrections, when a group of people move to a facility, they're under a 14-day quarantine to see if they show any symptoms. But we know, based on everything that we're hearing on the news every single day, that you may not exhibit your symptoms immediately. So supposedly, they are not moving people other than for emergency purposes, but they are still taking new people into our prison system every single day. It appears that people are moving. But if you talk to the Department of Corrections, or if you go on their website, they will tell you that, oh no, we're making sure that they're in quarantine. They're not getting in the general population for at least 14 days. For people out there who don't know, over at Sumter, their entire kitchen staff tested positive.
Wow.
Inmates did not want to go work in the kitchen. Now, there have been some people that have had to go to lockup because they refused to work in the kitchen. I'm being told that they asked for cleaning supplies and they did not get them. I've talked to the wardens and they've assured me that's not true, but I can tell you there was about a week and a half that they had all cold food. They were eating at 1 o'clock in the morning and nobody denied it. They admitted that, yes, that was true, because I'm getting the calls and the letters and the emails every day. So, we've got to be more proactive. We cannot just act like this is not real. It's a matter of time before this thing really spreads through our facilities. And that's not what we want to see happen.
No.
Absolutely. I see we have a question below for Senator Bracy. How are we supposed to trust the governor when he doesn't even care about our loved ones who are incarcerated or those who are out of employment? At the end of the day, these inmates are still humans and deserve to be treated as such.
I agree wholeheartedly, and that's why the three of us have been fighting on these inmates' behalf. We've communicated with the governor's office, the secretary. I just talked with the Department of Correction today numerous times. And so, but ultimately the governor has the final say. And so, I tell people, if you don't like the way he's dealt with unemployment, if you don't like the way his policies toward the Department of Corrections, vote him out. That's just really the only way to deal with that. And so that's my answer to that.
Thank you. So our next question is for Representative Valdes. When you look at the numbers, people from Black and Brown communities are hardest hit by the coronavirus. And so what do you think the reason behind that is?
Well, first of all, the African American and Hispanic community are one of those communities that are the most underserved when it comes to healthcare and access to healthcare. And they are the highest population of carrying diseases such as, or suffering from ailments, if you will, such as COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. They're asthmatics, they're diabetics, they have coronary artery diseases, which also makes them even more vulnerable to this disease. So it's a double-edged situation there. Not only do they not have the adequate access to healthcare, but on top of that, they cannot adequately take care of their ailments because of the lack of access to healthcare, therefore becoming more vulnerable to not only the COVID-19, but many other flu-like symptoms and other diseases. So it's extremely important that we recognize the disparities and the inequities when it comes to healthcare and our communities alike.
Let me also say to you, Brittney, as well. Part of the reason that we are under the gun is because there was no testing in our communities.
Correct.
If you all think about it, we just started really testing. Pop-ups have begun to pop up everywhere in African American and Hispanic communities. Prior to a month ago, there was not a test site within my district, other than, well, Raymond James is in the district, but that was it. Now, for the past month, we've had Lee Davis Neighborhood Service Center. Now we have it out near Busch Gardens. They're beginning to pop up, but the governor wants to open the state right in the middle of people getting tested. If we're not being tested, we really don't know what this looks like in the Black and Brown communities. We really don't know yet. Only 1% of 21 million people have been tested. I don't think we've tested nearly enough to really know what's happening.
Absolutely.
And also the awareness of people are afraid. Think about the population of the undocumented population who is afraid already, and they're in the shadows. And then on top of that, they're afraid of going to go get tested in fear that ICE might be there to snatch them or their kids or whatever. It's a very disheartening situation that's happening within the Hispanic population, because that's an extra layer of concern and that we have. And if you look at immigrants in general, we have our Haitian population, we have a lot of our Africans, Somalians. We have so many different types of ethnicities within our cultures that are fearful of just being able to go and get tested. So somehow or another, we got to try and help that fear kind of sort of dissipate for them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So our next question is actually going to be for Dr. Kubik. So can we get him up on screen? Hi, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
So my next question, so as president of the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida, the ACLU, can you tell us more about some of the criminal justice initiatives that the ACLU has made progress on, and what progress is being made toward criminal justice reform?
Sure. So I think, first of all, we have to say that even though this coronavirus crisis is pointing out so many of the flaws, so many of the ways that our system is broken, we should also acknowledge that the system has been fundamentally broken for a long, long time. We send too many people to prison and jail for too long, for too trivial of reasons. It costs us Floridians too much money, and it doesn't do a ding-dang thing to make communities safer, more just, or rehabilitated in the process. This is a system that is about punishment and social control, not about freedom, not about justice, not about making things right with victims or offenders. It is a system that is broken from top to bottom and needs a fundamental overhaul. You can see that in Florida just by the fact that the prison population has increased by 1,000% over the last 40 years. The population of the states only increased 3 times, but the population of our prisons has increased by 1,000%, even though crime is at an all-time low. That just doesn't make sense for that to be that many people in prison and jail when crime is at an all-time low. And you add on to that these enormous racial disparities that we have in Florida. You've probably heard about racial disparities in the country at large, but the fact of the matter is that disparities in Florida are worse than the national average. African Americans, Latinos, people of color make up a larger percentage of the prison population here than they do in the nation at large, and that's a big, big problem. There are a couple easy things that we can do about it, that we are doing about it, that we have to continue to put pressure on folks to do. Senator Bracy and Representative Hart talked about one big one, this cap on gain time that says that folks can only earn 15% shaved off their sentence. Just remember that they're earning that time. It's not just given to them. Folks who are in a facility, they go to a class, they learn a skill, they have good behavior, they do things within the facility to earn time taken off of their sentence. And Florida lags way behind the rest of the country on this. There are other states like Mississippi and Alabama where the cap is 65%. And I mean no disrespect, but anytime we're lagging behind Mississippi and Alabama, that's a problem. We need to do that right away. We need to lower that cap right away. As they said, it'll save us money, but it'll also make communities safer in the meantime, because you're going to have folks who are coming back who are better prepared to participate in civic life, better prepared to participate in community life, better prepared to participate in the life of their friends and neighbors. And that's what we should really be wanting. I think the other big one that we're working on, that we have to keep working on, especially now, is bail reform. Keep in mind, there are 100,000 people in Florida prisons, but on any given day, there are tens of thousands of other folk who are sitting in local county jails. And the majority of them have not been convicted of anything. They are incarcerated, they are in jail, they are in these facilities that you've already heard are petri dishes for the transmission of coronavirus, but they haven't been convicted of anything. They're sitting there only because they can't get a few $100s together. The courts, the prosecutors already say that it's safe for them to go into the community. They're not a public danger. That's why they're eligible for bail in the first place. But because they can't get together $100, $200, $300, they're sitting in jail facilities all around the state. I think that's fundamentally unfair, something that we have to correct. Because your access to justice, your ability to be with your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors, should not be dependent on whether you have a few $100s to your name or not. That's not what our American values are about. Justice should not be available only to the wealthy. So we absolutely have to do something about bail reform to make sure that cash bail is not the thing that winds up having people incarcerated versus being able to participate in community life. And if we do that, we'll also make our community safer at this particular moment in time when we're dealing with the COVID crisis to boot.
Absolutely. Thank you. So just a reminder to our audience at home, for those that are watching, we want to know from you all, what can folks that are passionate about criminal justice reform do to spark change? Definitely let us know in the comments below. And our next question is for Talithia, Ms. Talithia Edwards. So what can local communities be doing to help returning citizens in their community? And can you tell us about the community partnership initiative that you're currently working on?
Yes, I think this particular issue is so big. It has so many different levels to it, and being at the ground level where I'm out here advocating and seeing individuals re-entering society, and they have lack of access to housing, education, jobs, literally checking that box is causing a lot of different issues. So one of the things that I was working on right before COVID was an expungement day kind of series of events that I'm calling Take Back Your Rights. It's a collaborative issue with the justice system, our state attorney, clerk of courts, public defender, legal aid, everybody who wants to be involved that as a part of the criminal justice system to actually get involved. And so it's going to be a 3-part series. We're going to start with the expungement date. What was really, really powerful about working on the expungement date is that State Attorney Jack Campbell was fully committed to supporting the community and how we wanted to roll it out. He had worked and talked with the Chief Justice, so the Chief Justice was signed on. The important piece with that is the day that we did the clinic, individuals will walk in as a felon and walk out with a clean record on the same day. The entire court system was going to be brought into the community. I think that is the most powerful thing you can do for an individual who is eligible for expungement. As I learn and become educated, it is so many levels to the expungement process, right? And how that all works out. So we're working through all of that. The second piece of the expungement the expungement series, Take Back Your Rights, would be an on-site hiring day. And so what we wanted to do was collaborate with the business community, our state and local government, who all had available positions that they would come, and those individuals that had their records clear could interview on that day and be given a job on that day. So that was economically impactful to individuals. We can say, hey, you got a clean record, but now we're getting buy-in and commitment from our business community as well as our local government, our local government in Tallahassee already will hire someone who has been convicted of a felony, which is really good. And then the third piece of it was this fundraising piece, which can tie into the bail relief. And the individuals, before the Supreme Court passed it, we were facing the individuals with Amendment 4, right? That they had to pay those court costs and restitutions. And so all of that was looming over our head before it was decided that those things do not have to be fully satisfied for individuals to register and vote. And so hopefully that we can still galvanize our efforts and continue to register individuals to vote, get people out to vote, because this is going to be critical in this election. And really flipping Florida blue, right? So on my level, that's what I'm trying to do. Hopefully galvanize my community. I'm in a high impacted community. Our median income is $17,000. We have only over 3,000 residents in this one area alone, over 700 homes, with less than half of the residents voting. So that is, we could talk about all of Leon County and all of Florida, but as a local leader, I need to focus on where I can have a great impact, and hopefully other leaders are doing the same thing and can follow suit, and we can really begin to make a difference, because those entering our criminal justice system, what we have to realize as advocates is that the first interaction is the police, right? So they in communities, they're interacting with our local police, and so having that relationship with the police that are in our areas and that contact and really trying to get diversion. It's so big, Brittney, and I know you know it, but from a community level, trying to come up with something systematic that's effective is the key.
Absolutely. So I see we have a question. So what is being done to make courts use the point system in sentencing to assure more equitable sentencing for Black and Brown people? Can we go ahead and bring our elected officials back up?
Well, one of the things that's being done here and to make the courts use a point system more fair, one of the things that we were working on to try and get all over the entire state of Florida was the integrity review units. That's where in your state attorney's office, they can pull back up your file, review that file, and so many times the numbers are wrong. They may have given you 25 points. You only scored out to 18 points. So if everybody around the entire state of Florida had that integrity review unit, that would be just magnificent. I can only talk for Hillsborough County, where our state attorney does do that. I think in Duval and a couple other places, maybe Miami. And that gives people an opportunity when you've been unfairly sentenced, you get an opportunity to get back into court. Now, going to begin with, I don't know a lot about the point system and how they managed to mess up your scores to begin with. But I do know if you had an opportunity to get back after they have done something that was not right, they put the wrong numbers down. And I've been looking at them. It happens quite often. I may have scored out the 20, which would have given me 5 years, but you gave me 30 points. They gave me 15 years. So I don't know what we do about our judges. I think that we do have to untie judges' hands and give them some discretion, some discretionary, opportunity as legislators. But I do know that we needed to pass that bill last year, and I could not get it heard. And that was to get integrity review units throughout the entire state of Florida.
Absolutely, thank you. So before we sign off, I wanted to see, did anyone on our panel have any final thoughts on the subject today about the intersection of the criminal justice system and the coronavirus?
Well, let me just say this about the criminal justice system and to families and to all of you all out there that are watching. What moves that needle is advocacy. Even what Ms. Edwards is speaking about, all of that requires advocacy. All of those times you all came up to Tallahassee and there was 300 and 400 of you and legislators would not see you because they didn't want to hear what you had to say, now becomes your opportunity to vote them out. But you have to be calling your governor's office, calling your legislators, sending letters, sending emails. That's what makes the difference. Believe me, we all understand numbers because that's how we get here. So we need the community people to get involved and stay involved. The ACLU is doing a magnificent job fighting every day, but it takes all of us, community folk. We need you all fighting along with us.
I would just add that to that list of folks who you should be contacting, you should also add your local state attorney, right? The state attorney in your county has enormous power over all of these decisions that we're talking about. They have really untrammeled authority to make decisions about who gets charged, how much they get charged, the fees and fines that go along with it. The state sets some guidelines that they can only go up to the maximum of, but the state attorney can choose to go under that maximum all day long if they want to. And those are policy decisions that the state attorney makes. And too often state attorneys in Florida and all over this country don't really hear from constituents the same way that legislators and city council members and school board members do. And so it's time for community members to really blow up their phones too, write them letters too, so that they know that people in the community feel this way. Otherwise, they won't know.
That's exactly right. I agree with exactly what you said. Also, not leaving out the importance of our public defender, right? We're in an election year. We have to elect a public defender. Those charges originate with the public defender's office. If we are starting with charging individuals with crimes that they know cannot get expunged when they really know they could charge them with something less, like this is education, access to education about the criminal justice system overall for residents and community people as well. The more I learn, the more I try to disseminate that information. But our public defender, our state attorney, starting there locally because they affect our area, we really have to understand, because we're coming later in the policy issue to the House and to the Senate to make these policy choices, but we have those who are coming directly in contact, who are making the charges and assigning the fees to individuals that we're passing over.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd like to add to that is that, yes, send us the emails, and I agree with Representative Hart. The only way that we can tackle this is by having your voices heard through us, and we will advocate strongly and do what we have to do. Oftentimes, while the Senate and us were in session at the same time, you would see us bouncing over from side to side, just trying to see where we are in some of these policies and where we matching up. Are we there yet? And if not, you know what? There's also next session. But without you, there's no way. It's going to be a difficult task to do. So there's no offense to us by blowing up our emails and letting us know what's going on, because your voices will be heard through us. I pinky promise that. Thank you.
like to say I can be followed at Bracy on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I usually provide updates on the employment system, on what's going on with DOC. I saw a couple comments that were asked to me talking about their son was in danger, a couple comments. So I want to encourage anyone on the call, share my email. I'm sure that Representative Hart and Valdes feel the same way. Bracy.randolph@flsenate.gov. My phone number is 407-297-2045. I would just say we do need to stay engaged. We have an important election coming up this year. And so I think a lot of people can see how the COVID crisis was dealt with. I think the holes in our Department of Corrections are becoming magnified by this crisis. And so these are important issues. And I care about them. I know the people on this call care about them. And so we need to use our vote as our voice.
Right.
And we need to do it this year. So with that, thank you again for having me.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Senator Bracy, Representative Hart, Representative Valdes, Dr. Michael Kubik, and Ms. Talithia Edwards. I appreciate each and every one of you for being on this panel tonight because this is just such an important issue.
Thank you.
And so that brings our panel discussion to a close. We had a very passionate discussion about about the criminal justice system, and like all good things, it must come to an end. I want to thank each and every one of our panelists for taking the time to join us today and sharing their thoughts on this very important issue. I also want to thank everyone that's watching at home on Facebook, on Twitter, and on our YouTube channels. I hope everyone is staying safe, and if you're interested in learning more about any of our upcoming events here at the Florida Democratic Party, be sure to like and subscribe to all of our social media pages. Please be sure you can subscribe at FLA-DEMS, DEMS, on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, so you can be the first to hear about all of our upcoming events. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good evening.